Last month, the surf band Robotron released a 5-track album of live recordings, Live Set 2023, and it's from that collection that we pulled a song to play for this week's episode of the podcast devoted to the classic and sometimes not so classic genre cinema of yesteryear. This is Monster Kid Radio, and this song is called Intro Spectro Man. It is from a Live Set 2023. Like I said, it's from the band Robotron. You can find it on Bandcamp, Robotron, and then the number 1.bandcamp.com, or follow the link in the show notes over at monsterkidradio.net when you're done listening to this episode of Monster Kid Radio. Big thanks to the band for letting us play their music here on the show. You'll hear this song again in its entirety at the end of this episode. To get to the end, though, we've got all the stuff in the middle, and this week's episode got some really cool stuff in the middle. First of all, of course, we've got Mark Matzke's Beta Capsule review and Kenny's look at Famous Monsters of Filmland. Two more incredible segments, just knocking it out of the park, man, just making the podcast even better with their contributions. And then, the main conversation this week, we are having a returning guest, Kelly Hogaboom, coming on to talk about the movie The Abominable Snowman. Yes, it's a Hammer film. Yes, I've talked about this Hammer film before with a couple of fellow podcasters on another podcast back in the day, but I don't think I've ever talked about it here on Monster Kid Radio. And when Kelly said that they wanted to talk about this movie here on the show, I'm all in, man. It's Peter Cushing. I'm never going to say no to Peter Cushing. Plus, this movie's just really cool. Got a lot of really cool stuff in it, and we're going to talk about that with Kelly here in a little bit. I do want to take a moment here to say thank you to all of you who have supported Monster Kid Radio this year in the Rondo Hatton Classic Horror Awards. The ballot is live over at rondoaward.com. Go check that out to check out the entire ballot to see all the awesome categories and nominees in all of those awesome categories. It's just an amazing thing that David Colton has put together. It's just a huge thanks. Also, I have heard from David. Some people have reached out to me about something that I said in a previous episode a few weeks ago. I have heard from David regarding the Monster Kid Hall of Flame. Normally I'd cut that out. I'm going to leave that in there. The Monster Kid Radio Hall of Fame award that I won not too long ago, a few years ago. And it's still on the way. So I know I had some people reach out to me, and I suspect some of you may have even reached out to David to ask him about it on my behalf, unprompted. I didn't ask you to do that, but if you did, thank you. It is something that's going to happen. I have been in contact with David. I don't know if I'm going to get it before the wedding that's coming up here in a few weeks from me and Beth. And I bring up the wedding because I'm going to use that as a segue to the next thing that I want to mention. This is the last episode you're going to get with original content for the bulk of the episode from me for at least a week. Now, Steve Turek, who has graciously offered to do more guest stints here on Monster Kid Radio, has offered to do more. And I didn't ask him to do it, so Steve, thank you so much. Steve Turek's been on the show, of course, quite a bit. He's a longtime friend of Monster Kid Radio and me personally. Also, he's an incredible podcaster on his own, also nominated for a Rondo Award with the Diecast Movie Podcast, where I've been a guest a couple of times, which is super cool. You know, Steve just is awesome. He's just great. So he is going to be doing next week's episode, and we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end of the show. But finally, the last thing I want to mention about the wedding, and please, I'm not saying anybody's under any obligation. I only bring it up because I've had some people ask me about a wedding registry for Beth and I. We are getting married on April 8th, and yes, we do have a wedding registry. I've had some of you ask me about whether or not we have a wedding registry set up, and we do. It's through Amazon. I'm going to give you the shortened version of the link, tinyurl.com/MKR Wedding Registry. There will be a link in the show notes. Again, I'm not saying please send us stuff or whatever. I only bring it up because some people have asked me about it, and I thought I'd mention it here. But again, link in the show notes. Links in the show notes for everything that we're talking about here on the show this week, as always. But don't go there yet. I mean, listen to the show first. I mean, I suppose you could listen and go to the website at the same time. You do you. I'm not the boss of you. I'm just the guy that's running the show, and the guy who's going to step away from the microphone so that Mark Matzke and Kenny and everybody else can get in on the action this week. Here we go.
Lugosi's Dracula, Monsters from Under the Sea, Atomic Frankensteins, and Grandpa Monster 2. Classic monster memorabilia vendors, movie and TV stars, signing autographed photos. It's all coming to the Marriott Pittsburgh North, June 16th through the 18th, 2023. It's Monster Bash. Fans who grew up with monster movies in the theater and on TV will descend on the Marriott Pittsburgh North. Hundreds and hundreds of fans. Don't you miss out as fans travel from all over the country to meet, shop, and enjoy classic monster entertainment. Coming to Monster Bash in June, Audrey Dalton, star of The Monster That Challenged the World, and Boris Karloff's Thriller TV shows. Charlotte Austin, who starred in Frankenstein 1970 with Karloff, and Ed Wood's The Bride and the Beast. Lynn Lugosi Sparks, the granddaughter of Dracula himself, Bela Lugosi. Daniel Roebuck, star of countless films, TV's Matlock, and Grandpa Munster in the latest Munsters movie. Plus, he's a super fan and collector of classic monster memorabilia. Beverly Washburn, actress in Spider Baby with Lon Chaney Jr., Thriller, and Disney's Old Yeller. Tom Savini, actor, makeup man, special effects genius, with credits that include Creepshow, Tales from the Dark Side, The Black Phone, and so much more. Pamela Pierce, actress and daughter of the director that brought us The Legend of Boggy Creek. John Russo, co-writer and zombie from the original Night of the Living Dead, the origin of the modern zombie. And Ohio TV horror host legend, the one and only Son of Ghoul, still creeping to TV sets after all these years. Plus Cleveland horror hosts Drac and Countess Carita. Monster Bash is wall-to-wall vendors and a giant horror hotel packed with classic monster movie fans. Don't miss out. 3-day VIP admission is $55 in advance or $60 at the door for all 3 packed days. Single-day admission at the door is $25. It's all at the Pittsburgh Marriott North, Friday through Sunday, June 16th through the 18th, 2023. Get your advanced membership admission online at creepyclassics.com. That's creepyclassics.com. More information is available at monsterbash.us or call 724-238-4317. It's Monster Bash.
The creators of Tales from the Crypt and the author of Psycho have teamed up to present one of the most frightening film fantasies you will ever endure. Welcome to
the house that dripped blood.
Turn the knob, open the door, step past the bones, and don't venture beyond the light. Terror waits for you in every room.
The house that dripped blood.
No one has lived here in a long, long time, but many have tried and died. The previous owners are all still around, and they can't wait to meet you.
The house that dripped blood.
You can come in anytime, but you can't leave until they let you. A midnight encore from Filmways, rated PG.
Take heed, and beware the more in those dark hours when evil is exalted, else you will surely meet the Hound of Hell, the Hound of the Baskervilles.
Which way? For heaven's sake, which way?
The greatest story ever written by one of the world's greatest storytellers, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's classic masterpiece of mystery, suspense, and horror, The Hound of the Baskervilles.
Some revolting sacrificial rite has been performed. What depths a human being can sink to.
What human being could have done this?
That is precisely what I intend to find out.
But how can can't be so certain that somebody took one of the bishop's spiders and deliberately placed it in Sir Henry's room, that it wasn't in the luggage he brought from South Africa.
Elementary, my dear Watson. There are no tarantulas in South Africa.
What do you want me to do?
Identify anything I may find. Strange things are to be found on the moor. Like this, for instance.
Why? You thought it was going to be easy, didn't you? Didn't you? You won't be the first of your family who thought that. And you won't be the first to die because of it.
Live from the Land of Light in Nebula M78, home of the mighty Ultra Heroes, it's Monster Kid Radio's Beta Capsule Review. Return of Ultraman, Episode 7, Operation Monster Rainbow, first aired May 14th, 1971. While on a hike in the mountains near Nagano, Jiro snaps a photograph of Aki and Go. When it's developed, it reveals a kaiju looming in the background which had gone unnoticed, except for Go, who had sensed a strange presence thanks to his connection to Ultraman. The monster attack team investigates, but the reaction is mixed. Some members believe Jiro's photograph is legitimate, but there's enough debate to leave the matter unresolved. Captain Kato does allow Go to remain and investigate for one more day. That night, Go runs across a camp in which young adults are partying and warns them that the area is dangerous. They don't take him seriously and pay the price as a giant creature's eyes appear and the monster breathes fire that sets their tent ablaze. MAT returns to the valley where a rock-like monster emerges from the hillside, only to vanish before their eyes. Captain Kato and Oka hatch a plan called Operation Rainbow to spray the monster with paint that will prevent it from becoming transparent. However, their plan doesn't cover every eventuality, and the monster proves to be a more resilient foe than first expected. Operation Monster Rainbow is a visually attractive episode set in the Jigo-Kudani Valley with many of the scenes evidently filmed on location. Situated approximately 250 kilometers northwest of Tokyo, near Nagano, the river valley provides a beautiful setting for this story and is renowned for its natural hot springs and snow monkeys. Once again, the theme of trust within MAT is explored, especially early on as Go advocates for Jiro, while other team members are not as quick to accept the child's word. For the first time in Return of Ultraman, the viewer might sense some ambivalence about the mission of MAT. Monster Gorbagos is the least destructive kaiju encountered thus far, doesn't attack unless provoked, and has a few endearing mannerisms that indicate he just wants to be left alone. It's too bad that the default setting is to eliminate him. At least, the final shot suggests he may have met a peaceful end. For Monster Kid Radio's Beta Capsule Review, this is Mark Matzke reporting.
More than 100 years ago, in a mountain village in Switzerland, lived a man whose strange experiments with the dead have since become a legend. A legend that is still told with horror the world over.
We've only just started, just opened the door. But now's the time to go through that door and find what lies beyond it. But don't you see, Paul? We've discovered the source of life itself, and we've used it to restore a creature that was dead.
This is Frankenstein, who revolted against nature, who experimented with the devil and was forever cursed. His unwilling collaborator was Paul Kremp.
I can't prove you murdered, but I can stop you using his brain.
Why, he has no further use for it?
Don't be a... Be careful! You damned it!
Only 2 women ever entered this house of evil.
Elizabeth, come back!
Elizabeth, the lovely cousin who had promised to marry him, and Justine the maid, who kept passionate and secret rendezvous with her master.
Won't you understand you're in real danger? What Victor is doing is dangerous to everyone in the house. Now, you cannot possibly conceive what dreadful thing he's planning to do.
What are you trying to tell me, Paul? That Victor's wicked? Insane?
Wicked, insane, evil. Call Frankenstein what you will. A demon had made a man-made monster, and now the monster was the master.
Oh, what are you going to do? For your sake and to protect Elizabeth, I've so far kept silent. But now I shall go to the authorities and have them destroy that creature. And see that you pay for these atrocities.
This is the story of Dracula, a creature who destroys all whom he touches. Dracula the terrifying, the feared, who sleeps in the tombs of the dead by day and arises at night to inflict his terror upon the innocent and the unsuspecting.
Oh, you must help me. You must. You're my only hope. You must.
I'll help you. I promise.
Please try and understand. This is not Lucy, the sister you loved. It's only a shell, possessed and corrupted by the evil of Dracula.
How do you destroy a fiend who has so far proven himself indestructible? Those who come to end his reign of terror stay to become his victims.
Castle Dracula is somewhere here in Klausenberg. Will you tell me how I get there?
You ordered a meal, sir. As an innkeeper, it's my duty to serve you. When you've eaten, I ask you to go and leave us in peace.
This is the doctor who dares to challenge the vampire Dracula. This is the anguished man who fears for the lives of his beloved, the girl who is his sister, and the one that is his wife. Dracula, the bedeviled master of all that is evil.
Hello there, Monster Kid Radio heads. This is Kenny with a look at Famous Monsters of Filmland. Today's film, The Abominable Snowman, was not featured in FM, but one of its stars merited a 2-part article about his career in FM 117 and 118, Peter Cushing. Let's look at part of his life and career where today's movie is mentioned. We learn an interesting fact. But his early training in art finally helped. When he was unable to buy his beloved wife a Christmas present, he painted old-time figures on a piece of silk and gave her this beautiful scarf. One night she wore it to a play in which Peter was appearing, and a textile manufacturer admired the Christmas scarf. Peter was given a contract for 9 months to design scarves and so kept the wolf from the door. Peter's qualities as an actor evidently attracted the attention of an associate of the great actor Laurence Olivier. Peter was given the important role of Osric the Messenger in Olivier's Academy Award-winning film of Hamlet, frequently on US TV. As fate would have it, although he didn't meet him then, apparently another young actor had a very small part in the same film, Christopher Lee. Olivier was impressed by Cushing, and Peter with Helen toured Australia with Olivier and his wife Vivian Lee. When they returned to England, the illness-plagued Peter again became sick and was forced to leave the touring company. After he recovered, he and his wife wrote to over 50 TV producers seeking a job, and jobs he got. Between 1951 and 1975, he has appeared in over 50 TV shows. The most famous of these have included 1984, The Creature. In the movie version, The Abominable Snowman of the Himalayas, Peter repeated his TV role. Isaac Asimov's Caves of Steel, soon to be a movie, his guest appearances on The Avengers and Space 1999, and his own 1967 TV series, Sherlock Holmes. During his busy career on television, he won Best Actor awards 3 times, the Daily Mail Television Award 1953-54, the Guild Television Award 1955 for 1984, and the News Chronicle Television Top 10 Award for 1956. And at this same time, film offers were coming in. His most important roles until The Curse of Frankenstein were probably those in The Black Knight, The End of the Affair, a role of which he is especially fond, and Time Without Pity. That is all for this week's look at Famous Monsters of Filmland. We will have more next time. For MKR, this is Kenny saying adios.
Egypt, 4,000 years ago. A land of strange rituals and savage cruelty. Many of their secrets are still hidden from the eyes of 20th century man. Secrets that protect their dead. Supernatural powers that once released can live again in our modern world. The Mummy, the living dead, bringing terror and death across 4,000 years. He was a high priest of the great god Karnak, until one night he attempted the ultimate in blasphemy. He was condemned to guard forever the princess he had loved and protect her from intruders.
Go now. Go and destroy those who desecrated the tomb of our princess. He who robs the graves of Egypt dies.
In the year 1860, I, Baron Frankenstein, was sentenced to death on the guillotine. Why? Why had the world condemned me? Because I was the first man to create another living being. The first unnatural man. But because his brain was affected, because he could not control his animal instincts, he was hunted down and brutally murdered. But I have escaped the guillotine, and I shall avenge the death of my creation. Nobody. He isn't born yet.
You will witness scenes never before seen on a motion picture screen. You will see Frankenstein take the eyes of one man, the brain of another. You will see lifeless hands begin to move. You will see a man turn into the world's most terrifying monster.
Anesthetic! Switch off!
This is Count Vlad, but you may recognize me by my more familiar name, Count Dracula, and I'm here to offer you a friendly warning. Derek and his guests often get excited, and occasionally this results in revealing key plot points of the movies they're discussing. In your parlance, you might call these revelations spoilers. You know how the children of the night, monster kids, can get sometimes. So consider yourself warned, and don't come begging to me to kill them for their transgressions afterward. I have more pressing issues to take care of, like that pesky Van Helsing.
I haven't had this person on the show in a while. That seems to be a theme lately, where I'm kind of reaching out to people that have been on the show, but it's been so long, and they haven't been part of Monster Kid Radio. It's been over a year, according to Skype, since the last time I chatted with them. So I'd like to welcome back to the show, Kelly Hogaboom. How you doing, Kelly?
Hello, Derek. Hello. Good afternoon.
It is afternoon now. Daylight savings,
yes.
Man.
I know. Takes me like 2 days to get used to daylight savings, but I'm on top now.
I'm still dealing with it.
Yeah. I
Who likes this? Who really likes daylight savings? I don't know. We are not doing the daylight savings kid radio podcast, so move on from that. We're going to talk about a cool movie, one that you recommended, but I want to catch up with you. Like I said, it's been over a year. What are you up to these days? Do you have anything podcasting-wise or other online projects people can follow up with you on?
I guess, I'd love people to follow me on Instagram. I'm just my name on Instagram, Kelly Hogaboom, all one word. I am a designer. I make garments, and I have a cool project where I make clothes at no cost for trans and gender nonconforming people. And that's called the Tiny Horror Hug Club because I am such a horror fan. And I want to point out, I don't make regular clothes. You got to look at my stuff. I make amazing clothes. And I'm heavily influenced, Derek, by the 50s and 60s monster movies that were, that are kind of your wheelhouse. I'm also kind of an 80s horror person, so that creeps in. But yeah, that's what I've been up to. I've been watching a lot of horror. I actually watched so much horror last month that I had nightmares. And so I was like, I guess I do have a limit.
Wow.
I've been trying to balance back and watch some, I watched a drama last night. But I'm pretty much a full octane horror person. So
right on. My fiance and I went to go see Lady on a Train, which is not a horror movie at all, from 1945 last night at the Kickens Theater. So every once in a while, man cannot live on horror movies alone, as much as it kind of I cringe when I say that. Oh,
do you have a letterbox, Derek? I can't remember.
I think about it. But what would be the benefit of me having a letterboxd?
I guess I like it because when I do a guest on a podcast and someone says, "What have you been watching?" I just pull up my letterbox and I can see, and if there's something I've watched that's relevant to the podcast, I can talk about it. Because it's kind of hard when someone puts you on the spot when you watch a lot of stuff. You're like, I've been watching a lot. I don't know, and I'd love to follow you on Letterboxd. I'd love to follow you because then I'd see what you're up to.
I know at one point, I think Kenny was the guy behind it, doing a Monster Kid Radio letterbox, kind of keeping track of all the stuff that we've covered on the show.
That's cool.
But I haven't done it myself. I have an old school Google Doc where I keep track of all the movies that I watch. And I did that because a lot of the movies that I watch are like short films that I see at a film festival or something like that.
Right. Which wouldn't be in Letterboxd anymore.
Exactly. But,
and Letterboxd doesn't have TV either, I don't believe. But, it also is just pleasing visually. Letterboxd is pleasing to look at. So I don't know if they have a WordPress plugin, but when they do, I'm going to put that on my website for sure.
You should look into that. What is your website address?
For what? I do so much stuff.
Well, I want to make sure there's links in the show notes for everybody. So
okay, I would just link me to my regular, which is my brand name, which is bespokehogaboom.com. Okay. And or bmoviebffs.com. Either one of those will work.
Okay. I'll make sure there's links to that. Your Instagram. It looks like you've got a bio link as well, if that's still current.
Tons of stuff. I do too much stuff.
Too much stuff. Yeah. Right on. Well, when we were talking about movies to cover, you brought up The Abominable Snowman. We're talking about the 1957 film. I hope, because that's the one I watched again.
Right. Yes, we are. Yeah. The good one. I mean, there's some really bad Yeti movies out there.
I was looking at some things online, and I really like Trailers from Hell, the Joe Dante project.
Okay,
and
yeah.
He did an episode on The Abominable Snowman, and he said the exact same thing. There are a ton of Yeti movies. This is the good one.
I mean, it's kind of like werewolf movies. Like, I've watched many, I like many, but when it comes to like a truly excellent werewolf film, the list is kind of short.
It's tough, and you know me, people know me. I love these movies, even the so-called bad ones. I love Manos and Hands of Fate. So, I love these movies. It doesn't matter to me if it's considered good or bad. If I'm enjoying it, then it's a good movie as far as I'm concerned.
There you go.
So, yeah, I watch things like Man Beast and Snow Beast and all that, and I enjoy them. But this one is really
it's good.
So good.
It's good. It's weird because I feel like people don't know about it or talk about it very much. And like I don't hear people talking about it often, and yet it's so well done. It really is, and it really is like in concert with the Trollenberg Terror for me, for obvious reasons, right? And I love the Trollenberg Terror as well.
Sure. This is a Hammer film, and I think for people who aren't in it the way that we are, whenever we say, hey, this is a Hammer film, they're like, oh, really? You don't really expect this to be coming out of Hammer in the 50s, because when you think 50s Hammer, you start thinking about Frankenstein, Dracula, laying the groundwork for all the gothic stuff they would do in the late 50s and early 60s. But this one, it's directed by Val Guest, who's, a Hammer
Quatermass
guy.
Yeah.
It's Nigel Neal. Again, Quatermass, which I love the Quatermass films.
I know you do, yeah.
They're so good.
This one reminds me, the first time I saw it, it reminded me of a Twilight Zone episode that was just long. And then I did see that it was based off a television teleplay. And I don't know much about television. I didn't have one growing up and all of that. But it's like right in between a film and a TV, a good Twilight Zone episode for me. That's kind of how this one hits for me.
I used to do that Hammer Films podcast with Scott Morris and Casey Criswell, 1951 Down Place. Rest in peace. Yeah, we talked about this movie back then, and that came up, is that it felt like an elongated Twilight Zone episode where it kind of starts one way and then there's a sci-fi twist kind of creeping in. And yeah, it really does have that vibe, which, I don't think Nigel Neal would be disturbed by hearing. I still have not seen the TV play. I don't know if it exists anymore, if it's able to be seen. But
well, I bet there's like a radio version floating around out there somewhere.
That'd be amazing. And Peter Cushing is in both.
Yeah. So, of course, the great Peter Cushing. I'm just more and more of a fan every time I see or rewatch something of his.
Yeah.
I adore him. Of course, I'm vegan. He was a vegetarian most of his life, so that also endears me quite a bit, actually. That goes a long way with me. He was a total gentleman. It's funny, I don't know if I learned this on your podcast or where I learned it, but apparently one of his acting tricks was to pick things up and be touching something while he acted. And now that someone told me that, I really notice it, that he's always fiddling with a pipe or, the reliquary or whatever. But it's a good trick, right? You're not just sitting there like Will Ferrell in Talladega Nights, not knowing what to do with your hands. Right. So, but he's just so classic, and he's like a soothing presence for me to watch. I just adore him.
Hot props Cushing is what they would call him, because he would always find something to fiddle with. And I do remember back when I did that Hammer Films podcast, reading somewhere that there was a scene in this film where all the dialogue was done, but Cushing is still messing with stuff, and he's still picking up things off the desk and pulling out a file and starts filing a nail with it. And just like, what are you... What are you doing? They're just waiting for you to stop so they can say cut, just...
Right. We're done, yeah.
We're good.
Well, but, weirdly, this is so strange, but on Instagram, I keep getting interviews with Michael Caine, the actor, and he shares some of the craft. And he was talking about eye contact and not blinking. And then he did a demonstration. And I was thinking, there's a lot to the craft that we don't notice as a audience member. Because if you really think about it, someone always fiddling with stuff, you would be like, settle down, man, sit down. But in a performance, it keeps the dialogue from getting stale. It's actually kind of subtle. Again, once you notice it, though, you kind of really will notice that Peter Cushing is always fiddling, right?
Right.
But he does it so well.
I could watch Cushing do anything. I am such a fan. I've made no secret about this. Peter Cushing is the man. And one of my favorite things lately has been sharing some of these movies that I love so much with my fiance, who may not have seen a lot of these classic monster movies and all that. And anytime I have an opportunity to share Cushing with her, oh man, I'm ecstatic. She's a nerd, she's a geek, she's a Star Wars girl and all that, so she knows Cushing from that. But I don't know if we've watched any, or she's watched any of the Dracula or Frankensteins yet. Like, Can't wait to share that with her.
I was going to say, you have this whole world to share together.
Oh, man. Yeah,
and then we've got Forrest Tucker, who I also like. I point out I've only seen him in about 2 or 3 films, but I totally like him. I liked him in the Trelleborg Terror, and I like him in this film as well.
He's fantastic in that. He really is. You know, I think a lot of American audiences, they know him from like F Troop, that sort of thing, right? So to have this kind of serious portrayal in this movie.
Yeah, like, so I don't know anything about F Troop except for the MST3K jokes that came out of The Creeping Eye. But I guess it was comedy. I don't know. But you wouldn't know that based on Tucker's performance in this. And I believe he got his start in vaudeville when he was a teenager. So he has quite a range. I also have to laugh because there was a scene where they were talking about how big the Yeti must be, and by the footprints, I think, and someone said, "Oh, he must be 7 or 8 feet tall," and I was like, "Wasn't Forrest Tucker about 7 foot tall?" Because Peter Cushing, I think, is 6'1", and Forrest Tucker towers over him. And I looked it up, and Forrest Tucker was 6'5". That is a tall.
Oh my!
Man. Yeah.
Oh, he's taller than me. I'm a big.
And his hair gives him an inch at least.
Yeah,
right?
Would have to.
Yeah,
would have to.
So yeah.
Wow.
But he's good in this, and he plays that blustery, boorish American, but it's not a lampooning performance. It's just really well done.
And I understand that they intentionally decided to cast an American so that they could sell it to the American audiences. You know, that's a big part of the distribution and all that. And that's you see that in horror movies. You see that in the spaghetti westerns of the 60s and 70s. They would always cast an American so they could sell it overseas. But it didn't feel like, well, we just had access to an American, let's just throw him in. They got a guy who really knew what he was doing. He's enjoyable to watch.
He is. No, I agree. And like, you know, of course, there's a fair bit of racism in this film. Like if you have the continuum, I'd call it about a 4 out of 10. You know, it's not too awesome how they treat the indigenous, you know, people. However, the way that Forrest Tucker is bossing around everybody. He bosses around Peter Cushing's wife, Maureen Connell, her character, I think her name was Helen. So he instantly is telling her, you know, go give me some more food or whatever. He blows his cigarette smoke in people's faces when he talks. He barks out orders. And I honestly felt like it was the perfect performance for a guy of that era. Like, it's like that he wasn't like a huge jerk, but you wouldn't want to hang out with him. Like he was a bore, really.
He definitely was displaying some of those ugly American tropes, but there's still a charisma there, which makes me kind of
absolutely
feel squicky inside to say.
No, he is a charismatic. I mean, he's a leader. Like I said, it's very much of the era, and I really liked how he and Cushing, because Cushing has of course he brings class to like every role, right? With he's a villain, yeah. So he, you know, he kind of, you can tell he kind of doesn't like this guy, but they don't have a fight. And it actually gets a little physical, right? They have a little scuffle.
Right.
But that doesn't happen till well into the film when they are in a stressful situation, because Cushing is just kind of putting up with this guy that's kind of a jerk.
So overall, it's an expedition in the Himalayas. Cushing's already there, and he's joined by, what was his name? Tom Friend, played by Forrest Tucker, and a few other Americans, and they go looking for the Abominable Snowman. I don't know how in-depth the plot really is, because they're up on a mountain, they're looking for a Yeti.
Well, you know, this is a bit of an early eco-horror, if you ask me.
Yes, I could see that. Because,
you know, 70s was the big era of eco-horror. But if you think about this, you've got this llama character, played by a German actor, I want to add, this llama who says basically, okay, I don't think you should go up there, but go ahead, you're welcome to it. He's pretty sure that they're all going to get killed because he knows something that the Americans and the British don't know. And Peter Cushing ends up being the only survivor, and he makes the decision to keep his trap shut.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so there's a little bit of kind of colonialism and the rejection of like mankind wanting to exploit, you know, nature. Cushing, you know, sort of believes he's in it for the science, and Forrest Tucker is saying, listen, that won't work anymore. You can't just write learned books, right?
Yeah.
These guys writing these little books. he's basically saying we need to go on TV, we need to run around and make a circus out of this. And I think it gets revealed that Tucker has done this before in a fraudulent way. Like he's not a good guy. Like there was some other wolf boy or something that he essentially faked. So those themes work today.
Sure.
Like even though this is not an overly serious film, it had some cool themes to it.
And it's something that Hammer would dip into again too with some of the later Mummy movies that they would do, where they'd have the brash American showman wanting to exploit what they dug out of a tomb somewhere, and all the other characters, the British characters around them, knowing full well, I've seen a Mummy movie, I know what's supposed to happen here, knowing full well that this is not going to end well for anybody.
Right.
It's something that Hammer would do. It's something that had been done prior to this, King Kong. It's very...
It's a timeless thing.
Yeah, it really is. And gosh, Cushing just is so amazing.
Right, because at first he thinks he's like, oh, it's scientific curiosity, but by the end of the film, he regrets being a part of this essentially, exploitive mission.
Well, and he kind of he gets seduced by the whole thing too. He kind of falls victim to it as well.
Yeah.
His wife doesn't want him to go.
Yeah.
And there's that tension at the beginning when he's talking to a friend, he's talking to the locals, and the wife kind of is not happy about everything that's developing. She knows that her husband's going to take off, but she never flat out says, no, don't go. But there's still that tension. And I really like that too. The chemistry between the two of them was Peter Cushing and Maureen O'Connell. Really good.
And they don't mention what his previous accident was. He said he had a silly accident, but a bad one. So Peter Cushing has injured himself before, and I think that's his wife's objection is the danger. She doesn't really care about the Yeti one way or another at first. So some of the other cast, did you recognize the Trapper? Did you know you've seen him before? Robert Brown.
Oh yeah, no, he's great.
He was M in Bond movies.
He was M in the very first James Bond movie I ever saw, Octopussy.
It was Octopussy, yeah. A classic. Yeah. So he was M. I was like, because I was looking at him like, I recognize him. And then we had Wolf Morris, who plays, what's the guide's name? I can't remember.
Kusang, something like that?
Kusang, yeah. So what a great name, Wolf Morris. He was in The House That Dripped Blood. He just played the Waxworks owner in the Amicus film. I don't know if you saw that one, but
I have. Yeah.
Oh, you must have seen it. Yeah, of course you've seen it. So we've got, what a cool name though, Wolf.
Oh, it's a great name. And he did some other things for Hammer as well. Camp on Blood Island, which is not a horror movie, even though it's got a great title.
I haven't seen that.
It's one of their World War II films. It's Andre Morales in it. He's great. But yeah, he's done a handful of those. He did appear in a Sherlock Holmes movie at one point as well. I don't remember what role he played, but I know he did a Sherlock Holmes film, one of the more comedic takes in the 70s. But yeah, no, he's great too. I really liked him, and the name is fantastic.
Yeah. And then we had, so Richard Wattis plays Foxy, who is kind of the nerdier, and I feel like a queer-coded character, right? He's the nerdier professor who makes tea and kind of dithers around and stays at their base camp. He looked really familiar to me. I don't know where else I've seen him. And I thought he was going to get killed off, but he doesn't. He and the wife are safe in their monastery or wherever they're staying.
First time I saw this, I thought the same thing. I thought, he's gonna die.
Yeah.
He is ill-equipped to be up here. He's, as a character, he's kind of two-faced in some things. I really like the cold, and then a few minutes later, I can't wait to get out of here. I hate the cold. Just.
Oh, he says some straight up racist stuff. Now I'm remembering. Yeah. And also like the kind of fussy professor does end up getting killed off in these adventure sci-fi films from the 50s, 60s. So I thought he was a goner, but instead they gave that little fussy role to was it the photographer? And I didn't recognize him. So I might have to pull him up, but he, oh man, I can't remember his name. He gets like caught in a bear trap without teeth, but it probably like fractured his shin or something.
Yeah,
right?
You would think.
And then after that happens, he just kind of loses it, right? He just kind of collapses into, uselessness. And then the photographer who's laid up with his injured leg, he's the one who sees the first physical sighting of the Yeti. And I want to talk to you about that scene. What did you think?
Oh, it's fantastic. I think the Yeti, the slow reveal of the Yeti is fantastic.
I agree.
I think the character design is great, and the way they tease it, you see the tracks, you hear talking about it, whatever, you see the paw coming in.
That scene scared me the first time I saw it. Yeah, and by the way, I wasn't a kid. It was like 10 years ago. Because it's halfway through the film, and all you've seen are tracks. And all of a sudden, there's this, it's actually the sound that scared me, because he's in the tent, and you hear this unnerving sort of tapping and scratching. Very quiet. If this was an American film, especially the kind of American films I watched from the 80s, like the creature would bust in and tear the guy's head off. But instead, it's this like tap, tap, scratch. And then this hand slowly, that really reminded me of the Twilight Zone. This hand, and the hand is great. And I'm guessing, you're probably more educated than I am on this, I'm guessing they had some prop rifles that were made at like 2/3 scale or something, because the hand is so big, and it looks really good. Like the hand that comes in is a man's hand in, monster costume, but the guns are small compared to the hand. I don't know. It was really good special effects.
I hadn't really thought about that, but you're right. I wonder.
Yeah. They definitely established the size with just the hand, and that was well done. And that was creepy. Like even my husband, he rewatched this with me last night. He said that. He's like, yeah, that scene was creepy.
It's fantastic. And, I'm trying to just, while we're talking, I was just kind of skimming a couple of resources I have here. I can't find anything about the size of the rifle, but I would not be surprised.
Yeah, I should bring this to my little special effects podcast I go on every now and then with Eric Moore, the Effectively Speaking, because he probably knows all the answers.
Yeah.
But yeah, so, and also I have to say there was a part of this plot that reminded me of Attack of the Crab Monsters, which is not such a good film, but I love it. Like,
I love that. Yeah.
Very dearly. Yes. Well, if you remember, the crab monsters, once they ate somebody, they could then telepathically use their voice. I don't know.
Yeah.
So the Yeti isn't eating these men, but he's able to, or he or she or whatever, is able to like project. And it also reminded me of Crab Monsters, because in Crab Monsters, they made one claw out of papier mâché. And I feel like they kind of made one Yeti arm for this movie, because you see the Yeti arm a couple times, and you don't really see the full Yeti body in this film. You see it sort of backlit at the end, right?
Yeah, I think you're probably right. And, it's a cost-saving thing or whatever. Do what you kind of do.
Oh, yeah. But it's so well done, even with the cost savings, probably, And also the set pieces. I really like the set pieces in this film.
I do, too. And that's something that Hammer's known for, right?
That's true, yeah.
Gorgeous set work, the gorgeous production design. I believe Bernard Robinson was responsible for this as well, which, again, we associate him with Dracula's Castle, Frankenstein's Lab, all that stuff. You don't normally associate him with something like this. Everything in the village is fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely.
And even when you're up in the tents and the mountains and all that, it still looks great.
Even the scene where they overlay some sort of animation or whatever to indicate the snow, honestly, it still looks pretty good. And there's that, this is obviously well before CGI, but the practicality of the sets are nice. Like it doesn't give a low budget vibe at all. It's very, very dignified production.
I agree with you 100%. It doesn't feel like something that didn't have the biggest of budgets. And I don't know if it's because it's in black and white that I feel like it can kind of get away with more.
Yeah.
And then again, part of it's the quality of the cast. Cushing is a master at what he does, and Forrest Tucker is fantastic. This is Cushing's first work for Hammer Films. It's not the first film to come out. Curse of Frankenstein was released first, but this is what it was produced second. I don't know why they did it that way in the distribution, whatever. But yeah, this is the first time he actually worked for Hammer, and man, they had to know they had a master on their hands.
Yeah,
bringing back his Frankenstein and Van Helsing.
I agree. The cast, everybody does really well, and especially the principal, Forrest Tucker and Peter Cushing. And I have to say, just on a personal note, I've always loved adventure sci-fi or just straight up adventure. Like I used to read Treasure Island like once or twice a year growing up.
Nice.
And, this obviously has that light sci-fi horror aspect to it, but it is essentially kind of, it's an adventure film. And the truth of these high mountain peaks, the actual story is just as scary. People try to climb these mountains, then they die and they just leave their bodies there. Like there are bodies all over these peaks because they can't use the resources to schlep somebody back down.
Yeah.
So the actual horror of some of these remote mountainscapes is actually quite spooky.
It's
just
terrifying.
The real story.
You start thinking about the amount of corpses along the way to the top of Mount Everest and things like that.
Have you ever seen pictures of Mallory's body?
No, I have not.
Yeah, so Mallory, everyone knows who that is. Well, they found his body. It's still up there. You can look it up. George Mallory. He's got his, he's on his face and his body is still quite preserved and you can see his skin and that stuff is scary. Like it's scary without a Yeti being involved.
I'm not going to look that up because...
okay. You want to sleep tonight.
Well,
so.
It's less that and more, I have a tendency to look up weird things for my writing on Google. So my Google algorithms and Facebook algorithms are already screwed up enough. As I said in a recent panel interview, you start getting weird things when you start typing in things like, how much does human blood cost? So, I don't need
You're going to be on some list somewhere.
Yeah, I'm sure I already am. So, but the idea that there are all these corpses up there that have just been left behind because, like you said, they don't have the resources for it. Global warming, man, that's the stuff starts thawing out. I don't want to be anywhere near that.
Oh my gosh, right. Plus, it's also, there's that colonialism and imperialism because these wealthy, Western or European or American, they climb these mountains, they just litter, they just dump their old supplies, they drop their oxygen tanks. Like there is an ecological, imperialist aspect to this story that is very real. And, we're just taking our junk up there and dropping it so that we can say we climbed a mountain. So, not to get too deep with an Abominable Snowman movie, but, the ecological part is real. The colonialism is real.
You're right. And I think that's one of the things that I love about these movies is how we can see, it's a great story. It's a great adventure. There's some really cool stuff in it. The sci-fi element creeping in. It's not just a monster movie. We talked about Twilight Zone and Nigel Neal is, a master at his craft as well. But then we can also look and see these other elements creeping in. That's why I love these movies so much. That's why I love talking about these movies with people who have a different point of view or different experience. Hadn't even considered the fact that this could be an eco-horror, like a proto-eco-horror. Didn't even think about that, but it totally is.
And I do know that actual monasteries, some monasteries do have physical items they claim are from the Yeti. They that the reliquary part that had a carved tooth, there's a reality in that too, that there are some monasteries that are like, we've got a Yeti scalp, it's a sacred object. That's actually quite real. I'm not saying the Yeti is real. I'm saying that there are monasteries that have supposed remains. So there's enough factual basis in the story to make it pretty fun, actually. Yeah. I also noticed on a lighter note, Peter Cushing smokes Lucky Strikes. That's awesome. Yeah, I used to smoke those. Yeah, I smoked for 17 years. Lucky Strikes. No filter.
Wow.
Yeah, they're hardcore.
Wow. Well, yeah.
He smokes cigarettes and he smokes a pipe. But it was Forrest Tucker who actually died of lung cancer. I think Cushing died from prostate cancer, if I remember. But lots of smoking in these movies, right?
Lots of smoking. But that was the thing, right? It was nobody.
Yes, it was.
That there wasn't the concern. There wasn't any of that. So
doctors were in ads for cigarettes back then, right? Pretty wild.
The Flintstones were pimping them. So
Really? I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. There's like an old school, I believe it's a Flintstone commercial where they're promoting cigarette, it's a commercial there. It's like spokespersons for it. Yeah.
That just makes me sad.
Pretty sure.
Oh, geez. Kid stuff. I have a question about a scene. I don't know if you remember it. And I had this question when I first watched the movie. Maybe one of your listeners. There is a scene where it's just down to 3 survivors. So you've got the trapper, Shelley, I think is his name, played by Robert Brown.
Yeti.
And you've got Forrest Tucker and Peter Cushing. And the trapper is getting kind of like wound up, and he's like, I want action. We need to go after this thing. And they make the plan to have the net and have the trapper sit in the cave. And there's this look, like as the trapper, as Shelley is kind of like rambling and all manic about it, Forrest Tucker and Peter Cushing give each other this look. And it is definitely a significant moment, and I couldn't tell what they were trying to communicate. Because Forrest Tucker almost looks sad for a minute, and Peter Cushing looks very grave. I don't know. It's like a notable moment, and I want someone to tell me what it meant.
Well, if I remember right, and I mean, I just watched this movie this morning, again, it's been a while since I had seen it. They don't give Shelley live rounds, right?
Well, Forrest Tucker doesn't, but Peter Cushing would never have let that happen. So it's not a look of understanding between the two of them, because Peter Cushing would not have allowed that to happen.
Right.
So that was my first thought too, because they're basically sending him to his doom. But Cushing was not in on that. That was Forrest Tucker being evil.
Yeah.
So
I didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Cushing, his character, Rollison, would not have stood for that. I don't know. I'm gonna have to go back and rewatch it. Do they?
I don't.
I don't think Rollison would have been. Cushing's character would have been down with, sacrificing him or whatever. I mean, I know they're setting him up as
I don't
bait,
think so.
but
It's definitely a deliberate moment, and I just can't figure out what it might have meant. And my husband was falling asleep while we were watching this, so I don't think he was there for that part. Like, I kept waking him up. I'm like, come on, like, finish the movie. But he was too sleepy. So, yes, of course, you're down to 3 survivors at this point. Forrest Tucker does the evil thing of not putting live rounds. And then Shelley actually dies from fright.
Yeah.
Which is a real thing that can happen, which should scare everybody. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and you're already up there in the mountains. You've already got, your body's already taxed, right?
Oh, yeah.
You're already dealing with thinning oxygen. You're dealing with the temperature, exposure, all of that. A good scare or two. Yeah, I'd be done in if I could even make it that far. So, yeah.
Right. I don't think I could.
Yeah.
Because the wife gathers up some of the guides and mounts a rescue mission. I'm like, she must be in pretty good shape, because I could maybe do a half a mile climb.
Yeah, if that. If that for
Yeah.
me. Yeah, I who am I kidding? I'd get winded looking at the mountain.
Miserable.
Okay,
It just looks it looks miserable. Like, it's one thing to hike in pleasant weather when you're just wearing a tank top and it's sunny out. It's another thing to hike wearing 18 layers of whatever, and you're sweaty and your face is freezing. Oh my God,
right?
No, not.
But it's good that she does mount the rescue mission. They do recover the one survivor.
Right. So when you first saw, do you remember? Because I thought Peter Cushing was dead.
Yeah.
At that, when she finds him, because he's basically strung up. It's quite ghoulish.
Yeah, I thought so too. That the Yeti basically returned the body.
Yeah.
But
it's kind of like a FU, right? 'Cause
right.
He's like, he kind of crucifies him, right? Yeah.
But no, he does survive. He does make it to the end, and I love that ending where he's telling the llama, the villagers, what I was searching for. It just isn't there. It doesn't exist.
Yeah, it doesn't exist.
So what was he looking for? Redemption in some way. He wasn't looking there for monsters. He was looking for an advancement in science. It's kind of heady, but still.
Yeah, it is.
But again, it's still a great monster movie too, on top of everything else.
Thinking about it, does the Yeti actually commit any violence besides the last survivor, like nailing the survivor? Because the Yeti doesn't attack anyone. It gets trapped, and Bernard Shelley, Robert Brown,
Okay.
He dies of fright, but I don't think the Yeti actually hurts anyone.
It's the King Kong thing again. If we just left it alone,
right.
Everybody would have been fine.
Yep.
But no,
Yeah.
And yeah, this is such a great film. I love.
Yeah,
I
and
have to say it. I have to say it because I always do. I love the music. I love those huge bells
Score is
being
very
used.
good.
I assume they're like some
Yep.
sort of tubular bell setup. Just not the Tubular Bells by Mike Oldfield, but it's like this, that had that kind of tubular bell sound worked into the score. I loved that.
And also when they were in the village by the monastery, there were some people playing music, some kind of stringed instrument. And that was like kind of a hustle bustle scene. And that was very pretty, that music kind of floating in. This film has got great atmosphere. It's got a great tone. It's not a fast-paced film.
No.
It's not a horror, like an American horror film. You don't get to see a Yeti tear anyone apart. You don't see any sign of a monster for halfway through the film. So maybe that's why you don't hear people talking about this movie that much. But I just think it's so well done. Like, just awesome.
It's a lot of fun. It is a slow burn, but I still had a lot of fun with it. All the stuff in the village, you were talking about the different music and all that. And again, it illustrates the difference between the British and the American party there, when the American guys, I got to get a picture of this, and Cushing from the back, no, they don't allow it. Put that camera down.
Thank you for bringing that up, because also earlier when he's talking to the llama in one of the first scenes, he takes out a cigarette and then he says, "Do you permit?" And he asks the llama permission. So there are these signs that Cushing is a more respectful Westerner.
Yeah.
Right? Like he's not blowing smoke in people's faces or ordering his wife around or anything like that. So, but yes, he does say they don't permit it. I actually really liked that line. He's like, show some respect, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was very cool.
And I imagine that's a holdover from the original television production. And I don't know if it was commentary on the British filmmaker's part, talking about the brash Americans or not. I don't know. But it just is a neat illustration of the differences between the two.
Yeah, because, the British, of course, they had the biggest colonizing, history of all time.
Yeah.
That said, it's a little bit more about just the individual men themselves and their characters, right?
Yeah.
Forrest Tucker's just a certain type of guy. And I agree with you. He's charismatic. He's not played as a villain. He's just kind of I keep thinking of a word. It starts with D. It's got 4 letters. He's just kind of a jerk, and, but like you say, he's charismatic. And it's kind of funny when I looked up his height this morning. Apparently he's blonde. I can't tell it because it's a black and white film, but apparently he was blonde. So, he's a handsome, rugged, kind of John Wayne-esque type of guy.
Sure.
And he's cast was perfect in this.
Sure, he's very overly ambitious.
Yeah.
Overly ambitious.
He's the Quartermain type of guy, right?
Right,
Yeah.
which again, classic adventure fiction,
Yes.
And that's what this movie really feels like that. And I've been thinking a lot about like adventure fiction and action adventure storytelling and that sort of thing lately. For whatever reason, I'm not writing anything like that or anything like this. It's something that come up in some of the research I've done for other things. I'm not as familiar with that genre as I feel like I should be, because the few things that I've watched and read, I've loved.
Me too. I a few years ago I was in an art installation and I did a fiber arts version of Jim Hawkins in the Apple Barrel, because that's when he finds that Long John Silver is a bad guy. As a child, real tears, Derek. I had real tears coursing down my cheeks because I loved Long John Silver, right? And so I've watched just about every Treasure Island there is, and a lot of them aren't that great. I love Moby Dick. That's a much darker story, but I love, love, love adventure fiction. And I feel like in American cinema today, we go for these really bombastic special effects and we go for these big name actors, but that spirit of adventure is not as easy to find. And so I'm always looking for it because I love it. I raised myself reading those kind of books.
Right on.
Like the A Voyage to Journey to the Center of the Earth, that kind of stuff. Just love it. Love it.
Yeah. And actually, the listeners, if I can pull the curtain back a little bit, this is not the only recording I have scheduled today. I have a recording coming up, and you may hear it before or after. I don't know where it's going to end up in the lineup, with Mark Holmes, who's going to be coming back to the show, and we're going to be talking about At the Earth's Core. So
perfect.
So I got a double feature of Peter Cushing today. So,
lucky man, you're doing exactly what you want to do.
I did that on purpose. But again, that's another one of those adventure-type stories. There's some monster stuff in it, but it's this action-adventure. They're on a mission, on a quest. It's just great, and it's Cushing, and I'm going to save all of that until I record with Mark.
I don't know. Are you a Lord of the Rings, the films fan?
I do. I haven't watched them in forever. My fiance loves them. She's a huge fan of Lord of the Rings.
I think that's why I love those. Those came out 2 years ago because I was very pregnant. I remember. But there was that spirit of adventure. Of course, there's the lore and the Tolkien stuff, but ultimately these are adventure stories, and they hit that note for me in such a great way. And I think I'm always chasing those kind of stories. So The Abominable Snowman, of course, is a much more modest adventure story, but it still really is an adventure story. And I just love that. That's a genre I do adore.
It's an adventure story with sci-fi and horror trappings. You've got the monsters in it. The Yetis look great, and I do agree with Joe Dante. This is probably the best Abominable Snowman movie.
Yeti movie so far.
Yeah.
Let that be a challenge. Any nascent filmmakers out there, we are thirsty for another good Yeti film because there's not enough.
There we go. Chris Mim, Josh Kennedy, you listening?
Let's do it.
I want to see a Yeti movie through your lens. That's what I want to say.
Oh, and by the way, I've made a lot of Yeti. I made a baby outfit that's a Yeti outfit, and it's got the claws and everything, and like that. Someone in New York bought it, and it's out there somewhere, Derek. So I've made a lot of like Yeti stuff because I like monsters. Yeah, just like you, monster kid.
Well, we wouldn't be friends if you didn't. So
true. So true.
I don't know if that's true, but I wouldn't have met you if you didn't. So
I wouldn't be on your podcast getting excited about a dusty old Yeti movie if I wasn't a monster kid at heart. So. And I want to make one more comment, which is you talk about that action adventure. I think that's one reason that The Hound of the Baskervilles is one of the most popular Holmes stories, because there is that element of action and adventure that isn't in other Sherlock Holmes stories. And you even have a horror/supernatural component that, of course, gets debunked. But like, why do we love Hound of the Baskervilles? I think it's that it's got a little bit of teeth and claws, right?
I've often wondered about that because Hammer only did the one Sherlock Holmes
which
movie,
is so good.
Which is great. Hound of the Baskervilles is fantastic, and Cushing's an amazing Sherlock Holmes. He did it on television for years, and he was fantastic in that too. And I mean, he's one of my favorites. I'd say he's probably one of the best when it comes to playing that character. But you're right. Yeah, Hammer only did the one. And maybe it is because it does have the action adventure and the whiff of supernatural stuff going on.
It does. Yeah. Yeah. And it's in a remote location. Like it just kind of is the perfect. I mean, I read all the Sherlock Holmes stories, and I've even read other authors who tried their hand at it. But I always loved that one. I have to laugh too, because I remember Christopher Lee saying that he said it was the only time he got to play a romantic lead. And I'm like, yeah, you were a little rapey, dude. Like you weren't as romantic as you think, but great movie. Love all the tweed. There's just gallons and gallons of tweed in that film. And of course, the wonderful, wonderful Peter Cushing.
Cushing's just fantastic. Like I said earlier, I can watch Cushing do anything. I really could.
Yep. We are in agreement there.
Just anything he wants to do, even he does do some corruption's kind of tough to watch, but I still love him.
Oh yeah.
I still love him.
I haven't seen that one in forever, actually.
As I'd say, it's not a woman's picture, which it's,
yeah.
I don't know why. I don't know if that's a selling point or not. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, you gotta get a paycheck, so. Yeah. I forgot about that one. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of people.
Yeah, maybe best forgotten about. Yeah.
But of course I own it on Blu-ray because I do.
Because you're a completist.
Yeah. I've watched it once since I picked it up on Blu-ray. That's it.
You go. Well, my podcast I do with Tim Turner, we do 4 films at a time. He always makes me watch some giallo, and it's so if I can watch giallo, I can sit through a exploitation film that Peter Cushing's in.
There you go. Yeah, I don't tend to go down the giallo hole very much.
I don't get it.
It's not.
I don't get it at all.
It's just not one of the ones that I respond to, subgenres I respond to. But something like this, I certainly will.
Yep.
And talking about them with friends is always the best thing about these movies for me. And something that I've been really trying to focus on lately with Monster Kid Radio, especially as I bring people on, because there are a limited amount of classic monster movies to talk about. When I bring somebody on who wants to talk about a movie that I've previously talked about, that's cool by me because it's a whole different experience. Hearing about how you first saw it 10 years ago and he's terrifying you. It's a different conversation that I had with Scott and Casey, years ago on the Hammer Films podcast I used to do. And that's what I love about these movies is hearing about people's backgrounds and fandom and where that comes from. So I had no idea that you were into like action adventure type fiction. And
oh yeah.
The Treasure Island thing, I would not have even guessed, to be honest, Kelly. I would have no idea.
Yeah.
course, now I've got the Muppets singing Cabin Fever rubbing through my head.
Part of that is sort of gender stuff. I'm non-binary. I grew up, definitely kind of relegated to the women and girls section, and action adventure for me. I was definitely relating to Jim Hawkins, right? I was wanting to be on that ship, and also I have to say there's something about the decency and camaraderie of the men in these kind of films. I always think of Dracula. That was another book I really loved. And even though the men in Dracula keep screwing up and keep leaving Lucy by herself, right? Ultimately, it was a film about this camaraderie between these adventure type men. And I love that kind of stuff. And like I said, in American cinema today, we kind of focus on the single hero and we focus on the explosions. And I want to see that camaraderie. I want to see men working together, or women, or non-binary people. But
sure, just people working
big
together.
Fan.
Yeah,
people, kind of on that mission and lifting one another up. And that gets me. That's about as soft as I get for film, because most of the time I'm watching people cut their heads off with meat cleavers and stuff and my horror stuff. So, yeah, I've got a soft side, Derek.
And if people want to see that soft side, follow you on Instagram.
Yes, follow me on Instagram. And thank you so much, Derek. This film is fun. By the way, your podcast keeps racking up awards and attention. Congratulations again. And thank you for having me along today.
I appreciate that. Yeah, the Rondo Award nominations had come out, and I'm just honored to be included on the list with so many other amazing podcasts out there. So I do appreciate that. But the reason Monster Kid Radio is any good is because I get to have people like you on the show. The guests make the show, the segments make the show. So thank you for helping to make Monster Kid Radio what it is and being part of that legacy for me.
Awesome. Thanks, Derek.
That brings us to the end of this week's episode of Monster Kid Radio. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Thank you for participating with the show in any way that you do, whether you're posting links on Facebook or retweeting tweets or doing anything on our Reddit or on our Discord, or if you're a patron over on Patreon, whatever it is you do, thank you. I appreciate you being here and being part of the show. If you want to know anything else about Monster Kid Radio, head over to monsterkidradio.net. That's where you're going to find all of our show notes and our contact information. You can email me at monsterkidradio@gmail.com, or you can call and leave us a voicemail at 360-524-2484. If you have anything to contribute, I'll include it in an upcoming episode of Monster Kid Radio. Speaking of upcoming episodes of MKR, as I said at the top of the show, next week's episode is going to be a return for guest. We need an official name for him. Steve Turek's going to be back on the show to help out, and he's not going to be doing it by himself. He's bringing along a guest of his own, somebody that you're very familiar with. Kenny's going to be joining him because he and Kenny are going to be talking about the classic film Mighty Joe Young. Now, I've downloaded the file. I've listened to the first few minutes of it to make sure the sound is good. And of course, it was. I probably didn't need to do that. I trust Steve. But I haven't had a chance to listen to the actual recording yet. While I'm putting the episode together, I'll be listening to it then. I'm excited to get into it myself. I hope you're excited to come back next week to listen to that conversation with Kenny. Now, Steve and I have talked about him doing some other episodes as well. I know he's had an episode planned with Scott Morris featuring the movie Twonky, which could be a lot of fun, should be a lot of fun, will be a lot of fun. So I know that's coming up as well, health and everything else permitting for everybody involved. So stay tuned, subscribe to the show through whatever podcast directory or catcher you use, and you'll get new episodes every time we drop something out there. Now, we are on YouTube as well with Monster Kid Radio, but Beth and I also have our own YouTube channel called Team Death, TEAMDETH. It's a DE from Derek, TH from Beth. So please consider checking that out as well and throwing us a subscribe. You can look us up on YouTube by looking for Team Death 48. We had to put a number on there because somebody else had Team Death 48. It's short for April 8th, which is the day that we're getting married. We are going to have some new movie, drop-ins or reviews coming up on there as well. We actually just recorded a couple of things that I'm going to be editing here, probably this weekend, where we went to the movies to see movies like The Big Sleep and a Godzilla movie. There are some of the videos on the channel right now as well, and I'm hoping that before the wedding I can have time to put together another installment of Monster Kid X, which is a video series that I'm going to be doing on that YouTube channel. If you are a YouTube user, please consider subscribing to the channel and following along, because we've got a lot of really cool content planned that we cannot wait to share with you all. Oh man, I'm so excited about everything that I've got coming up with Beth, whether it's this YouTube thing, whether it's some other projects that we've talked about. Probably most importantly, though, this whole wedding thing that's happening. Really excited about that. Anyway, thank you for listening. I appreciate you being here. Remember, the Monster Kid Radio is registered service mark of Monster Kid Radio, LLC. All original content of Monster Kid Radio by Monster Kid Radio, LLC is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 3.0 unported license. Of course, that doesn't apply to the song Intro Spectral Man. That is copyright Robotron. They are a surf band based out of Norway. They are super cool, and they can be found online at Robotron and then the number 1.bandcamp.com. Link in the show notes, of course. Check them out and let them know that Monster Kid Radio sent you. My name is Derek M. Cook. I'll talk to everybody next week. Ciao.